Good evening and welcome to NTD News. I'm Stephania Cox. Here are today's top stories. While releasing the U.S. State Department's annual report on international religious freedom, Secretary Blinken announced sanctions on a Chinese official and his family. An influential name in American politics has just been stripped of power. We have the details from Washington, D.C. Gasoline shortages in Georgia and Virginia following the cyberattack on Colonial pipeline. Georgia's governor calls on residents to conserve gas, but how long does he expect the emergency to last? A group of over 100 retired generals are warning Americans that the nation is in a fight against Marxism and socialism. They say it's unlike any other time since 1776. The Yankees win a game, but 3 members test positive for COVID, 2 of them coaches. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken on Wednesday released the State Department's report on international religious freedom. Blinken also announced a visa ban on a Chinese official and his family for persecuting practitioners of the spiritual discipline Falun Gong.
The State Department reports annually on religious freedom around the world. Secretary Antony Blinken hit on several key countries, including China.
And China broadly criminalizes religious expression and continues to commit crimes against humanity and genocide against Muslim Uyghurs and members of other religious and ethnic minority groups.
The report's China section is 136 pages. It details China's persecution of a range of religions, including the spiritual practice Falun Gong. Blinken announced new sanctions on a Chinese official who previously headed Chengdu's 610 office. That's the communist regime's agency solely dedicated to persecuting Falun Gong practitioners.
Today, I'm announcing the designation of Yu Wei, former office director of the so-called Central Leading Group Preventing and Dealing with Heretical Religions of Chengdu, for his involvement in gross violations of human rights, namely the arbitrary detention of Falun Gong practitioners.
Yu Hui and his family can no longer enter the United States. Former Ambassador at Large for International Religious Freedom, Sam Brownback, says this sends a strong signal to China.
It sends them the signal that we're not going to let them get away with this war on faith.
I think this sends a strong signal to those CCP officials in China that the persecution of Falun Gong is not only illegal, it will be penalized internationally, and the international society is watching.
The State Department cites data from Minghui, a U.S.-based website dedicated to reporting on this persecution. The government report says Chinese police arrested over 6,600 Falun Gong practitioners and harassed more than 8,500 practitioners in 2020 for refusing to renounce their faith, compared with 2019, which saw over 6,100 arrested and 3,500 harassed. 83 individuals also died due to persecution. The report also quotes some NGO reports on organ harvesting in China, including the China Tribunal's judgment after an independent inquiry. The tribunal documented evidence of what they concluded is a decades-long and ongoing state-run program of forced organ harvesting from prisoners of conscience, mainly Falun Gong practitioners.
Now we've got credible findings by other entities of organ harvesting happening to Falun Gong members. And these are by outside groups that have reviewed the evidence and said, yes, this is taking place.
The U.S. has designated China a country of particular concern since 1999 under the International Religious Freedom Act for having engaged in or tolerated particularly severe violations of religious freedom.
Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, daughter of former Vice President Dick Cheney, has been removed from a key leadership position in the House of Representatives. NTD's Steve Lance has the latest from Capitol Hill.
In a quick vote this morning that lasted only about 15 minutes, House Republicans voted to oust Congresswoman Liz Cheney from her position as House Republican Conference Chair. Representatives on the Hill say that it's time for change in leadership.
Now we need a true leader, a conservative in that position. Republicans know when you campaign as a conservative, you win elections.
Cheney's position as conference chair made her the third most powerful Republican in the House of Representatives, just behind Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy and Minority Whip Steve Scalise. Cheney did speak with the press shortly after her removal.
I will do everything I can to ensure that the former president never again gets anywhere near the Oval Office.
Cheney had harsh words for former President Trump. Some say the overwhelming support to oust Cheney from her leadership position cements Trump's hold on the Republican Party. The former president issued a statement in support of Cheney's ouster. Trump said, "She is a talking point for Democrats, whether that means the border, the gas lines, inflation, or destroying our economy." Representative Boebert told us that she is hopeful moving forward.
I do believe that Republicans are unified.
One thing most of the Republican members of Congress told me was that they do feel unified going into the 2022 midterm elections. Steve Lance, NTD News, Washington, D.C.
A group of House Republicans introduced 2 bills targeting critical race theory on Wednesday. The bills would prohibit using federal funds to teach or promote critical race theory in schools and federal government workplaces.
North Carolina Congressman Dan Bishop led dozens of House Republican lawmakers in introducing the 2 bills on Wednesday. The first bill is the Combating Racist Training in the Military Act. Senator Tom Cotton introduced a similar bill in the Senate. This bill prohibits the U.S. military from using materials to promote critical race theory. The other bill, the Stop CRT Act, is more comprehensive. If passed, this bill will ban any federal funds from promoting the theory anywhere. Congressman Bishop announced the bills at Wednesday's press conference on Capitol Hill.
For the sake of our children's future, we must stop this effort to cancel the truth of our founding and our country. States around the country, legislatures are undertaking this effort.
Critical race theory has been heavily promoted throughout schools, corporations, government offices, and Hollywood in recent years. In September 2020, former President Trump signed an executive order banning the federal government from using critical race theory-based training materials. President Biden revoked this executive order as soon as he took office.
We are the United States of America, not the divided states of America. This is federal tax dollars, the American workers' tax dollars that are going to fund this agenda. We have teachers' unions that are destroying our children's education and future because of their woke agenda, and someone needs to put a stop to it, and that's exactly what we're here to do.
According to Congressman Bishop, about 70 lawmakers have co-sponsored the bills at this point.
It's a crucial week for President Biden's infrastructure priorities. In their first White House meeting today, Republican leaders say they won't back any tax hikes for a recovery plan.
Top 4 members of congressional leadership had their first White House meeting today since Biden took office. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell and House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy signaled they'd be willing to work with the president on infrastructure, but drew the line at tax increases.
We're not interested in reopening the 2017 tax bill. We both made that clear to the president. That's our red line.
The White House has been pushing Congress to approve a near $2.3 trillion infrastructure bill and a $1.8 trillion education and child care plan. This met sharp resistance from Republicans, as Biden is planning to raise taxes in order to pay for his ambitious plans.
Those numbers we heard today on inflation, that should terrify every American. Because it's not a question of whether there's going to be a tax increase. You just had the biggest tax increase you've had in more than 10 years, and it hit you already.
Biden has defended his plans to tax corporations and the wealthy, saying it's time they started paying their fair share. But based on the latest data from the IRS, in 2018, the top 1% earned around 20% of all income, but paid around 40% of all individual income taxes. Biden has been holding meetings with lawmakers to forward the infrastructure bill. He will meet 6 Republican senators on Thursday. Lin Lin, NTD News.
This just in, Colonial Pipeline, a major pipeline on the East Coast, restarted operations at 5 p.m. Eastern. The pipeline was shut down following a large-scale cyber attack. The company says it'll take several days for the supply chain to return to normal. This, as the company said, they didn't plan to pay the hackers ransom. Colonial Pipeline says it'll provide more updates as the restarting process continues. And the governor of Georgia is calling on residents to conserve gasoline. This after the Colonial Pipeline shutdown triggered a massive gas shortage in the state. NTD's Kevin Hogan has more.
Georgia Governor Brian Kemp told residents on Wednesday to remain calm during a gasoline shortage in the region. He says the best way to handle the situation is for consumers only to buy fuel needed for central activities.
Please do not go out and fill up every 5-gallon can that you have. Doing so will only mean this shortage will last longer and more Georgians will be unable to make it to work, take their kids to school, or get to their medical appointment.
About 1/6 of gas stations in Georgia and Virginia are dry as of Wednesday, according to GasBuddy. Cities have been hit particularly hard, with 60% of stations in Atlanta out of gas. The state's Attorney General Chris Carr informed residents that price gouging statutes are in effect during the emergency.
While the state of emergency remains in effect, businesses may not charge more for products and services identified by the governor than they charged before the declaration. This includes motor fuel and diesel fuel. It's important to note, however, that prices may go up due to a verifiable increase in the cost of new stock or the cost to transport it.
The FBI confirmed the criminal group known as DarkSide is behind the hack on Colonial pipeline. The hackers, believed to be located in Eastern Europe, reportedly threatened to release the pipeline's data to the internet if a ransom is not paid. Kemp has suspended state taxes on motor fuels through Saturday, and he predicts the state's gas shortage will only be short-term. Kevin Hogan, NTD News.
And former White House economic advisor Larry Kudlow says he believes recent airstrikes in the Middle East are connected to the cyber attack on Colonial pipeline. He says U.S. adversaries are testing President Biden to see what he'll do. NTD's Jessica Beatty reports.
Cyber hackers are, in fact, Russian cyber hackers.
Fox host Larry Kudlow said Tuesday he believes the recent cyber attack on Colonial pipeline is connected to what's happening in the Middle East.
I believe the cyber hacking in the U.S. Southeast is absolutely linked to the Hamas shooting war on Israel. Okay? I see it all of a piece, and President Biden is being tested.
He claims that the cyber hackers are Russian. He also says Russia backs Iran, which is connected to Hamas, and that China also finances Iran. They're all connected. Kudlow says new presidents get tested all the time, and so far, he says Biden is just taking the punches.
Do you swear that the
And the top U.S. cybersecurity official warned a Senate committee Tuesday of more aggressive ransomware attacks on U.S. infrastructure.
Malicious cyber actors today are dedicating time and resources towards researching, stealing, and exploiting vulnerabilities, using more complex attacks to avoid detection, and developing new techniques to target information and communications technology supply chains.
He said the SolarWinds hack earlier this year should have been a wake-up call. Now, after the cyber attack on Colonial pipeline, he says the U.S. needs updated cybersecurity systems and more funding.
We must rethink our approach to cybersecurity. But as the pace and scale of cyber threats that we face expands, so must our response toolkit. We need sustained investment to modernize and protect our most critical federal systems.
The pipeline hack has led to gas shortages in the Southeast. In response, the governors of Virginia, Georgia, Florida, and North Carolina declared states of emergency. The Biden administration projected that the pipeline will restart in a few days. It urges drivers not to hoard gas. Jessica Beatty, NTD News.
A Russian-speaking ransomware group released over 20 D.C. police officers' personal records. This group hacked the D.C. Police Department in April and asked for $4 million. 22 officers' personal information was published, such as social security numbers, psychological assessment results, fingerprints, driver's licenses, as well as residential, financial, and marriage histories. The gang also released screenshots showing that the police department countered with an offer of $100,000. The group said it would release all the stolen data if the department doesn't raise the price. That includes the identities of confidential informants. And the New York Yankees beat the Tampa Bay Rays 3-1. The scoreboard looked good, but not their COVID tests. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on 3 members, all fully vaccinated, who tested positive that night.
2 Yankees coaches and 1 of their staff members tested positive on Tuesday. We know of 2, Coach Phil Kevin and Coach Reggie Willits. 1 staff member went unidentified. Now all 3 members were fully vaccinated, so these are breakthrough cases. The CDC's latest data shows some 9,200 breakthrough cases in the U.S. out of the over 100 million who've been fully vaccinated. but we don't know what vaccines they took. Yankees manager Aaron Boone says there's a few people that we sent home just as a precaution to make sure. A little bit of a skeleton staff, but nothing we can't handle. Now, California, a state that's had some of the heaviest lockdowns, might lighten up next month. A Fox LA reporter asked Governor Gavin Newsom about masks, and it sounded like they're coming off.
And are we looking at masks after June 15th?
No, only in those settings that are indoor, only in those massively large settings. Otherwise, we'll make guidance recommendations, but no mandates and no restrictions in businesses large and small.
California has reported less than 2,000 cases just about every day for the past 3 weeks. That's microscopic compared to the nearly 40 million people who live there. Okay, now let's go over to Michigan. Their governor took a lot of heat when she visited Florida in March. People accused her of taking a vacation and criticized her for traveling out of state when they advised Michiganders to avoid it. Well, at a press conference on Wednesday, she confirmed that she was caring for an ill family member.
Like a lot of children of parents who have health issues or relatives who have health issues, I showed up when I was needed. I did a lot of cooking, a lot of cleaning. I also did my day job. When a family member of mine needs a little help, though, I'm going to show up.
She didn't say who this relative was, but her office, in a statement, previously said Whitmer visited her ill father. She also said her trip wasn't paid for using taxpayer money. That's all from me, Steph.
Thanks, Miguel. And more than 100 retired military leaders are warning about the threat of Marxism and socialism. They say today's fight to preserve the constitutional republic of the United States is unlike any other since 1776. NTD's Allison Lee has more.
At least 124 retired generals, admirals from 5 branches of the U.S. military are warning of impending danger for America. They signed an open letter Tuesday. It opens with, "Our nation is in deep peril. We are in a fight for our survival as a constitutional republic like no other time since our founding in 1776. The conflict is between supporters of socialism and Marxism versus supporters of constitutional freedom and liberty." The group of military leaders call themselves Flag Officers for America. They list a number of issues as threats to constitutional freedoms, including a lack of election integrity, government overreach through executive action, draconian lockdown measures, as well as the censorship of expression. The retired military leaders are also warning against cooperation with the Chinese Communist Party, saying it is the greatest external threat to America. The group says cooperation emboldens the regime to continue progress towards world domination, militarily, economically, politically, and technologically. They point to a number of other national security issues, including open borders, the Iran nuclear deal, energy independence, and the politicization of the military. The open letter reads, "Under the current administration, our country has taken a hard left turn toward socialism and a Marxist form of tyrannical government." The retired general's message to America is that we must support and hold accountable politicians who will act to counter socialism, Marxism, and progressivism, and support our constitutional republic. They say citizens must counter the left turn towards socialism by electing representatives who will save the constitutional republic. The survival of the whole nation is at stake, they say. During the 2020 election, a similar group of over 300 senior military leaders signed another open letter. In it, they said the 2020 election could be the most consequential since America's founding. Allison Lee, NTD News.
Arizona Governor Doug Ducey signed a bill to update mail-in voting eligibility requirements. In a letter, he said it seeks to protect the integrity of elections. The new law centers on the early voting system. It aims to make sure only active voters who wish to vote by mail in elections are named on the state's active early voting list. Voters who don't return at least one early ballot over the course of 4 years will be sent a postcard asking whether they wish to stay on the list. They may also get the message via telephone, text message, or email. If they don't respond, then they could be removed from the list. But voters who are removed will also be allowed to reapply. One state senator said the initiative simply removes non-voters. Critics say the policy will make voting more difficult for occasional voters, lower-income voters, and people of color. As the violence continues in Israel, several airlines in the United States are pausing travel into the area and canceled flights to Tel Aviv. American Airlines has canceled its flights into Tel Aviv for Wednesday and Thursday. United Airlines also called off several flights into Tel Aviv. Delta Airlines also canceled one flight between Kennedy Airport and Tel Aviv on Wednesday. They issued a travel waiver, and a spokesperson said the airline would monitor the situation, but they don't know when they'll resume flights yet. All three airlines are issuing some form of fee waivers for these flights. Violence between Israelis and Palestinians is the most serious escalation in years, according to the United Nations Mideast envoy. And Israel's prime minister said the militants will pay a heavy price for the attacks. And inflation speeding up. Consumer prices rose 4.2% year over year in April. That's the fastest rate in about 13 years. NTD's Tom Ojimek has the details.
U.S. consumer prices have soared above economists' predictions and by the most in over a decade. It's fueling fears of a prolonged bout of higher inflation. The Labor Department said Wednesday that the Consumer Price Index, or CPI, jumped by 4.2% year over year in April. This is the largest 12-month increase since September 2008, when the index rose by 4.9%. On a monthly basis, the CPI inflation gauge jumped 0.8% in April. The so-called core CPI, which excludes the volatile food and energy components, soared by 0.9%. The largest monthly increase since 1982. A major contributor to the monthly inflation spike was the price index for used cars and trucks. It surged by a record 10% in April, the largest monthly increase in history. The sharp rise in inflation is likely to stoke fears of an interest rate hike by the Fed, although Federal Reserve officials have played down the concerns by predicting that price rises would be transitory. They've also repeatedly said they will not raise rates or reduce the monthly bond buying program until inflation averages around 2% for a prolonged period. Tom Ozimek, NTD News.
Several prominent Italian Americans gathered at Columbus Circle in New York City to oppose the renaming of Columbus Day. The holiday name was reportedly changed to please both Italian Americans and racial justice advocates who accuse Columbus of genocide. NTD's Jason Perry reports.
When asked about Columbus Day being changed to Italian Heritage Day and Indigenous Peoples Day, Mayor Bill de Blasio said he and the school chancellor did not know it was going to be changed.
They didn't brief me. They should have briefed her. It was not the right way to do things.
New York State Chairman for the Commission on Social Justice, John Fratta, did not take the mayor's comments at face value.
And if anybody honestly believes that the mayor and the chancellor knew nothing about this, I have a bridge you could buy. That's not true. That's not true. But now that they do know about it, they could do the right thing. Reverse the decision. Put Columbus Day back on the school calendar.
The president of the Conference of Presidents of Major Italian American Organizations, Basil Russo, says he doesn't like the way Italian Americans are stereotyped on television as members of organized crime. He says Italian Americans are fighting to make sure the truth is taught about Christopher Columbus.
Christopher Columbus did not introduce slavery to America. He did not commit genocide. He did not abuse Native Americans. Every bit of primary source material describes Columbus as a good Christian who treated Native Americans with dignity and respect.
A prominent New York attorney says America is the greatest country on the planet, and people need to understand what is going on.
If you even just take Columbus out of it, who's next? Is it St. Patrick's? Who's next? Is St. Patrick's Day? Is it going to be Greek Heritage Day? Is it going to be the Dominican Parade? Like, what are we doing? America it's a mosaic. It's unlike any country in the world on our planet. And the Italian American contribution is tremendous. Nobody can doubt it.
Now that the event is over, Italian Americans are calling on Mayor de Blasio to put Columbus Day back in schools. And they said they would like to compromise and have Indigenous People Day on a different day. Jason Perry, NTD News, New York.
Leaders of a Hindu sect in New Jersey are facing a federal probe. They've been accused of forced labor practices and luring in workers from overseas. NTD's Andrew Thomas has the story.
Federal agents launched the investigation on Tuesday. That's after workers at a Hindu temple in New Jersey claimed they were forced to build the structure. A lawsuit filed in federal court accuses the leaders of the Hindu sect known as BAPs of human trafficking and wage law violations.
It's shocking that this happens in our backyard, or really anywhere.
The suit claims more than 200 workers from marginalized communities in India were coerced into signing employment agreements, and that they were promised work at the Hindu temple in Robbinsville, outside Trenton. They traveled under R1 visas.
As the workers were coming here, BAPs told the government that they were coming as religious workers and as volunteers, where the workers truly were coming to do manual labor. And they were not coming as religious workers, and they were not volunteers.
The lawsuit alleges their passports were taken away once they arrived. It also says they were forced to work at the temple 12 to 13 hours a day and paid just $450 a month. That's roughly $1.20 per hour. According to the lawsuit, the workers lived in a fenced-in compound where their movements were monitored by cameras and guards. They were told that if they left, police would arrest them for not having their passports. The lawsuit names BAP's CEO, Kanu Patel, and several other individuals. The suit seeks unpaid wages, as well as unspecified compensation and disciplinary action. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
It's not common knowledge, but scattered around New York City are a handful of waterfalls. NTD's Sapphire Quarter shares with us some of the big city's hidden gems.
In New York City, you almost feel trapped in an alternate reality of metal mountains and concrete ground. But there's hidden pockets of serenity throughout the city, if you know where to find them. For instance, waterfalls. Despite being entirely artificial, the multiple waterfalls at 100 United Nations Plaza carries some of nature's charm. Located near the corner of East 48th Street and 1st Avenue by the Hudson River, the beautiful scene is enhanced by the tiny gardens surrounding it. No doubt it's surprising to those who come across it. This waterfall is so well hidden, we almost didn't find it. Tucked away between 5th and Madison Avenues on West 53rd Street, it serves as a backdrop to those eating at Valboa. The around 15-foot cascades soft hum acting as dinner music. Of course, not all waterfalls in New York City try to mimic nature. Many, like the one on 6th Avenue in front of a bank, are less of a distraction from the city than an enhancement of it. You hear the fountains roar long before you see it, drowning out the sounds of cars passing by. Waterfalls are just one of the many hidden gems throughout New York City. Sapphire Quarter, NTD News, New York.
People in Wisconsin might soon hear the national anthem played before every sporting event. A bill just passed the state assembly requiring that the anthem be played at all sporting events at fields or stadiums that receive public funding. The bill passed in a 74-22 vote. State Representative Tony Kurtz, who sponsored the bill, told WISN the goal is to remind people of the importance of the flag and the anthem. He says he doesn't want to make it enforceable, and there will be no penalty for venues that don't play the song before an event. But some Democrats against the move have said it's a political stunt. Kurtz spoke out against the division, saying he just wants Americans to remember that we are one big family. The bill will now head to the Republican-controlled Senate, and if it passes there, it'll end up at Democratic Governor Tony Evers' desk. A minor league baseball team associated with the Boston Red Sox just got a new home stadium, and their fans sure are excited about it. NTD's Arian Pazdar has that story.
We now pronounce Polar Park open!
Polar Park, the new home of the Woo Sox in Massachusetts, opened on Tuesday.
Oh, we're really excited to be here today, and it's going to be a fun day, and we're really excited about the game today.
The ballpark itself is ready, but construction is still underway in the surrounding areas. Polar Park got its name from the local company Polar Seltzer. NTD spoke with a representative from the company who was there for the opening game.
It's just nice to be outdoors, and we've been stuck inside for so long, and outdoors is where we must be. So
The Woo Sox had planned to open Polar Park in April, but after the pandemic hit, MLB delayed the AAA season. The team on Tuesday celebrated an 8-5 win against the Syracuse Mets, making their long-awaited first home game all the sweeter. Arian Pastar, NTD News.
Residents of California may see their water bills increase. One county recently announced they will be charging extra during the drought. NTD's Eileen Ang has more.
Amid California's drought, the Santa Clara Valley Water Board of Directors decided to charge residents of the county more in order to keep underground water at normal levels. The average water bill may see an increase of 9% per month. That's about $4.30 to $4.82 more. The change could last for the next 10 years. The increased rates will pay for water conservation programs and other projects to prepare for natural disasters. But not all residents like the idea.
Last time this happened, they told us to conserve 20% more water every single year, and we did as a county. And then we ended up saving 40%, which was a great job on everybody's part. Then they sent us a letter saying our bill would increase by more because they lost $8 million in revenue, because we saved too much water that year. So, I mean, if we save, we pay more. If we don't save, we pay more. So either way, we're paying more.
Usually they say they're gonna go into support those things to help us out, but in the end, it really does not go for that purpose. So I'm hoping that they're actually gonna stick to it and fund those projects.
The pandemic is so-called over. They wasn't making as much money anyway, and a lot of people was getting over not paying their bills, you know what I mean? So now they're trying to make up for that. I don't think it's fair. I don't pay your water bill, but even like my family and my loved ones who do pay water bills, I don't think it's fair.
Santa Clara County declared it was an extreme drought on May 7th. The increased rates are set to start on July 1st. Eileen Ang, NTD News, California.
It's planting season for corn and soybeans again. A father-son team in Wisconsin is working around the clock on their 1,100 acres of land. They say they feel positive about 2021 and that they're taking a natural approach.
The Pyrick family farm's fields are full of crops, but the crops are not corn nor soy, and they are not going to harvest it.
We are currently planting corn in our rye cover crop.
Josh and his father Tony started using cover crops years ago to improve the health of their soil. Right now, the rye cover crops act like placeholders for the actual harvest.
The main benefit we've noticed with the cover crops is weed suppression. We've been able to reduce our herbicide use on beans to help control the weeds.
The Pyricks tell NTD they are optimistic about this year's corn and soy harvest. On top of that, futures for corn and soy on the NASDAQ are approaching record highs since mid-2012.
Oh, it's an exciting time in agriculture now. These cover crops are fun. You see the green fields out there, you see the living roots out there, and it's just amazing. And seeing your biology come back to life and seeing the earthworms come back.
Over 150,000 farms across the country have found benefits in using cover crops. The Pyricks have reduced fertilizer and no longer need to treat seeds with chemicals. They also no longer till the ground.
In a teaspoon of soil, there's more living organisms than there is people on Earth. When you go under a microscope and start seeing that and see what live soil looks like and the biology, it's like building a house. Okay, you build a house. Would you tear it down every year and rebuild it every year?
Tony grew up farming with his father in the 70s. Josh joined him in carrying on the tradition after returning from college.
So already going on 14 years already, 15 years already, hey.
And he will carry on these conservation practices for many years to come.
Memorial Day is just weeks away, and Americans are eager for the advent of summer this year. That's after being cooped up for more than a year during pandemic-related shutdowns. As for Memorial Day weekend travel plans, AAA says it expects 60% more travelers this year than last year. That amounts to more than 37 million people traveling 50 miles or more from home. AAA credits the expected travel increase to rising vaccination rates and higher consumer confidence. The head of a Chinese state-run media is threatening to bomb Australia if it ever helps the U.S. in a war over Taiwan. And at the same time, the U.S. Navy is commissioning a new warship. NTD's Tiffany Meyer brings us more.
The head of a Chinese Communist Party mouthpiece is suggesting that Beijing should bomb Australia. That's if it allies with the U.S. in protecting Taiwan. The editor-in-chief of the Global Times, Hu Xijing, posted on Chinese social media Weibo last Friday, saying Beijing should use long-range missiles if Australia supports the U.S. in any future military conflict over Taiwan. Hu's social media post said they must know what disasters they would cause to their country if they were bold enough to coordinate with the U.S. to interfere militarily in the Taiwan problem. His warning came amid rising tensions between Australia and Beijing. About 2 weeks ago, Beijing warned the Australian government that if it wants to end the trade war, it has to support Beijing to, as they call, reunify with Taiwan. Taiwan is strongly opposed to the so-called unification under Chinese communist rule. The democratic island has its own elected leaders, constitution, and military. Communist China has never ruled Taiwan, but it has never given up the idea of annexing Taiwan by force. The regime is also ramping up its aggression over Taiwan recently. They are frequently sending military jets into Taiwan's air defense zone. The U.S. Navy has officially commissioned its new warship. The vessel was placed into active service last week, marked by a ceremony at San Diego's Naval Air Station, North Island. The USS Miguel Keith is nearly 800 feet long and cost $525 million to construct. It took 2 years to build and is the world's largest conventional power vessel. That means it is powered by coal, oil, or natural gas. Admiral Craig Fowler of the U.S. Southern Command spoke about the ship at its commissioning ceremony. He said its crew would fight on the front line against threats to the U.S. and is particularly prepared for conflicts with China. He added that the Chinese Communist Party, with its insidious and corrupt influence, seeks global dominance and to impose its version of international order. Fowler also insisted that the U.S. must stay on top of its game and continue developing the best technology and the best ships, calling it necessary in order to continue winning this global competition. The USS Miguel Keith can travel about 10,000 nautical miles at a speed of 15 knots. That's about 17 miles per hour. The ship will hold a crew of around 100 sailors and over 40 civilian mariners. The vessel's size means it acts as a mobile sea base and can accommodate the Navy's largest helicopters, the MH-53, as well as Marine Corps' F-35B jets. Admiral Craig Fowler said the Miguel Keith may travel all over the world in its lifetime, to places like the South China Sea and the Strait of Hormuz.
The U.S. is set to remove a Chinese multinational electronics company from its blacklist. And that's despite previous warnings that the company is controlled by the Chinese military. Here's Evelyn Lee with more.
The U.S. is set to remove Chinese phone maker Xiaomi from its investment blacklist. The Trump administration blacklisted it in January, saying it was owned or controlled by the Chinese military. It meant that Xiaomi would be delisted from U.S. exchanges. It would also be barred from accessing U.S. technology, hampering new product development. Xiaomi denied having ties to the Chinese military, then it sued the U.S. government. But questions have been raised about Xiaomi's founder and CEO Lei Jun. He's also a senior executive and shareholder of Chinese software company Kingsoft. The Epoch Times reports the Chinese Communist Party, or CCP's military commission, requested that Kingsoft be established. The Trump administration argued that U.S. investments in these companies support the expansion and development of the CCP's military. In 2015, Chinese leader Xi Jinping unveiled a new national strategy. It ensures that the Chinese military has access to civilian companies and research programs supporting the CCP's military modernization goals. A U.S. court sided with Xiaomi in March and halted the ban. Now court filings say the two sides will resolve the litigation without further contest. Analysts say the news is no guarantee that other firms will also be removed from the list. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
Xiaomi's shares rallied over 6% following the decision. The Chinese company is the world's third largest smartphone maker. And an end of an era for Debenhams. Once the biggest department store in the UK, the chain will close all of its high street stores for the last time this week. Here's NTD's Jane Werrell with more.
Debenhams' time on the high street is coming to an end after 242 years. All of its stores will shut this week. Fashion retailer Boohoo bought Debenhams for £55 million in January. It bought the brand, but not the shops. It meant 118 remaining Debenhams stores and its workers had to go. The closure of Debenhams' physical stores, including this flagship store in London, means that 12,000 people will lose their jobs. Pandemic shutdowns proved too much for the already struggling retailer.
Debenhams has been a weak business for many, many years. The clock has been ticking for an awful long time. Meanwhile, some other department stores have done much better, have invested more in the infrastructure of their businesses, in the shopping experience, in the quality of the product, and they have fared better, albeit still had to face a hit from the pandemic.
In a similar shift, online retailer ASOS bought the Topshop and Miss Selfridge brands in February, but didn't want their physical stores. A sense of sadness on the street, but a feeling that it was inevitable.
I think it's quite sad. It's quite sort of, at the moment, everything's very empty and desolate. I think it'll be an opportunity to maybe look at retail buildings and offices and stuff and change the way we live.
I think it's a shame, but I think the pandemic has just accelerated what was happening anyway, that people's shopping habits are becoming more convenient to the individual rather than convenient to the shop owner. And things have to move in that direction. And if you lag behind and hope things are going to move backwards, you're going to lose out.
It didn't really affect me too much because I wasn't really the person that would go to Debenhams. I wasn't really the person experiencing the Debenhams experience, saying that way. But I think that being so present in so many high streets, I think it affected everyone.
While Debenhams will disappear from the high street, it will still continue online. But town planners will be wondering what's next for the empty stores. Jane Werrell, NTD News, London.
Britain will invest over $30 million to help vulnerable countries tackle cyber threats originating from China, Russia, and other actors. UK Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab made that announcement today.
Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab warns that hostile state actors and criminal gangs are using technology to undermine democracy. He was addressing an online security conference on Wednesday. Raab said it is important to broaden the group of like-minded countries in tackling the cyber threat. He said the UK government will invest £22 million to help vulnerable countries in Africa and the Indo-Pacific build up their cyber defences. The UK will also work with Interpol to set up a new cyber operations hub in Africa to support joint operations against cybercrime.
The Council of Europe warns of threats to individual freedoms, human rights, and the rule of law across the continent. A new report finds that some governments misused pandemic restrictions to centralize power.
Europe's leading human rights body warns that the threat to personal freedoms have worsened during the pandemic. In its annual report, the Council of Europe said some European governments are using health restrictions as a pretext to expand their power. The report says, individuals' rights and liberty have been curtailed in ways that would be unacceptable in normal times. The danger is that our democratic culture will not fully recover. In several countries, safeguards for the judiciary and other institutions were already under threat. Now they have been further eroded. The report chides Turkey, Moldova, Hungary, and Russia for practices that include intimidation and arbitrary detention of government critics, or changes to the judiciary that was seen as a threat to its independence. Power was also concentrated and centralized in government hands as restrictions meant to fight the pandemic were misused or kept for too long. The report states, COVID-related restrictions and measures must not only be necessary and proportionate, but also limited in duration. It also noted that elections were postponed in many countries or conducted in a way in which observation was almost impossible to carry out. Based in Strasbourg, France, the Council of Europe was created after World War II to protect human and democratic rights. It's not an EU body, and its 47 members now include Russia and countries of Caucasus region. The Secretary-General of the Council of Europe said, "Our member states now face a choice. They can continue to permit or facilitate this democratic backsliding, or they can work together to reverse this trend."
The first spacecraft ever to enter interstellar space is revealing new insights. According to a new study, it detects a persistent hum beyond our solar system. The spacecraft is called Voyager 1. Findings were published in the journal Nature Astronomy on Monday. They attribute the sound to plasma waves reverberating through space, changing in frequency based on surrounding density. Voyager 1 was built with special antennas to pick up these tones and transmit the information 14 billion miles back to Earth. The sounds have been collected since 2012. A Cornell University-led research team says they reveal a new way to measure densities in interstellar space. They explain it's creating a system to better map the space between the stars. And a hobbyist in the Philippines has amassed an impressive collection of fast food toys over almost 50 years. NTD's Andrew Thomas has that story.
From the age of 5, Filipino graphic artist Percival Luge has had a passion for collecting toys, but not just any toys. He prefers those from fast food restaurant chains like McDonald's, Burger King, and home country favorite Jollibee. Now, the 50-year-old has about 20,000 toys packed from floor to ceiling in his home. He also holds a Guinness World Record from 2014. At the time, his collection surpassed 10,000 items.
As a young kid, I've already known myself to be putting them on display, on cabinets. Unlike the other kids who would really tear up their toys into smithereens.
Luge built his home especially to house his collection. He likens the excitement of getting new toys to Christmas morning. While he's collected most of them on his own, some were gifted by friends and family. He says he has no idea what the entire collection is worth. One of his most treasured pieces is a Hetty Spaghetti figurine, a mascot from the Jollibee chain that his mother gave him in 1988.
So the toy is like a storyteller in itself. Like, for example, it gives me a glimpse of that particular period when I got it, my story, what's going on, what are the incidents that are attached in the acquisition of that particular toy.
Luge hopes to eventually put his collection on display for the public, or even open a museum. Andrew Thomas, NTD News.
And that's all for today's news. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Stephanie Cox.